Welcome to Building the Basics. We're dedicated to helping the prospective and first-time firearm owner in the decision-making journey by talking about the most likely concepts and questions that you'll encounter in the firearms world. One, to empower you to ask the right questions, and two, to determine what works best for you in your scenario. This podcast is aimed at taking the anxiety and uncertainty out of the process for the prospective and first-time firearm owner. So think of us as the friend or family member going with you on your first trip to the gun store.
In our first episode, we were talking about a lot of topics at a high level, but now that we've broken the ice, we want to focus this episode on the why and the reasons why someone might be looking to purchase a firearm. We have the privilege of one of our friends, Dave, joining us today, who actually works in the industry and will provide some great insight into what he's seen over the last several years. Welcome to the podcast, Dave. Just to start things off, care to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, name's Dave. I've been working in the industry since 2019, but more so on the retail side since beginning of 2021. So just to preface everything I say, it's not a reflection of my employer. It's my own personal thoughts and opinions. Yeah, it was funny listening to the first episode because talking about some of the reasons why people get into firearms. For me, it was the history. Big history nerd. So growing up, it was always World War II, Cold War history. First gun was a Bulgarian Makarov. So there you go.
That's really cool. Yeah. Before we get too much into things, I just wanted to, as a token of our appreciation for your time and everything that you're doing for us today, just want to give you a bag of grass-fed beef jerky. So hope
Awesome.
It's something that
Appreciate
you like. So thank you for your time, and hope you enjoy it.
I definitely will.
Awesome. Yeah, so Marvin, do you want to start things off? Anything that's burning in your mind right now?
So I wanted to learn a little bit more about your interest in World War II history. I think that's something that a lot of folks discount when they're talking about people who are interested in guns and firearms. So I guess what got you into World War II, and what drew you into the firearms aspect of it? I mean, there's so much strategy and, tanks and airplanes and all of this other stuff. What about, I guess, small arms drew you in?
I think from an early age, it was always I was always interested in kind of how stuff worked. So it not only the firearms, but also aviation, tanks, and vehicles and such. But really, firearms are kind of the really only truly attainable item that kind of harkens back to that era. That's still like a mechanical item that can still be used as it was.
Okay, all right, and I guess what would, if you were to pick one firearm from World War II, what would it be? What's the thing that epitomizes, I guess, guns from that era for you?
I mean, a lot of people would say the M1 Garand, but I have a soft spot in my heart for the 1903 Springfield.
Ah, okay. All right. And for the folks who are listening who don't know anything about what a 1903 Springfield is, could you give us a little bit of a description and, and what you like about that particular rifle?
Absolutely. So it was developed in 1903, became the U.S. military service rifle, all the way World War I, World War II. By World War II, it was starting to be phased out. But it's just a classic design, based off, ironically, a German action, which is a fun little tidbit that not many people know. Very cool.
Very cool. So let's switch gears and talk about you in the present day. So what brought you into the firearms industry? And I may have missed it earlier, but how long have you been doing this for?
So ironically, I was in the service and retail industry for almost 10 years. Just got burnt out and did the thing that you shouldn't do and quit your job without anything lined up. So I was throwing out applications, ended up at a local manufacturer. So that was in September 2019, started with them, and then ended up moving, found a local gun shop close to me, and figured see if I could pick up some part-time work there. So started there in January 2021, so right in the middle of the peak pandemic and craziness. So seen a lot.
Which actually kind of goes really well into, what we're trying to get to today is, so you said, kind of peak pandemic area, or era, when you have that perspective, when you're getting right into there. So what were you seeing, like, with people coming into the gun shop? Was it a lot of people that had already owned firearms, or were you seeing that people were coming in brand new? They're like, I need some help, can you provide some suggestions, or, just kind of interested in hearing, what we were experiencing back then?
Yeah, absolutely. That time we were seeing way more first-time buyers than any other time. I'd venture to say probably about half were first-time buyers.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty wild in the sense of not being able to keep stuff in stock, supply chain issues on top of just manufacturers not being able to keep up with demand, and that went for not only firearms but the associated accessories and ammunition.
Yeah, and then that probably drove up prices and all that, just like with everything, unfortunately.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So during that time, you said 50% were first-time buyers. What would you say the primary reason that most of these buyers were coming in and purchasing? Was it for personal defense? Was it for home defense? As you're having conversations with these folks, what were the reasons they were giving you?
The vast majority, right around that time, and I'd say still the majority right now, is primarily home defense or just defense in general. But what I personally see is a lot of first-time buyers. They come in knowing that they want something for personal defense, but they're not quite sure what they're looking for and what's going to be the best option.
So how do you tailor them to, or how maybe you ask them these questions, like how do you tailor them to, okay, if you want it for a home defense or self-defense or something like that, how do you have that conversation with them, whether it's a rifle or a pistol or a shotgun? Like, how do you gauge, their level of what they're trying to do?
I usually start off by asking if they have any experience with firearms in the past and kind of what that looked like. If they're brand new, kind of high level overview, breaking down the different styles. But before that, asking, is this something you're going to carry? Is this going to live at home? Is it something down the road you might consider carrying? Because that will dictate kind of the flow of that conversation.
And when you do have that conversation, I guess, how many of these people actually have a ready-made answer for you, or is it something that you're going to have to dig a bit deeper as you're talking to them?
Depends on the person. I'd say a lot of the time they haven't even gotten to that point themselves in terms of asking those questions. And if you're brand new walking in, that's a very fair point to be starting from. Because no one has ever asked you those questions and kind of prompted a response.
And when you do ask them these questions, do you notice that they're taken aback, or is it something that it's more of, hey, I've never really thought about this. Nobody's ever asked me this. What kind of reactions do you usually elicit when you have that line of questioning?
Most of the time, it's definitely the second. They've just never had anyone prompt that response from them because it's not something they ever considered. They may have considered purchasing a firearm in the past, but not really asked the why to themselves and what exactly they're looking for.
Do you find that there's not like a... how you can go into a car dealership and then it's like, I'm just trying to learn some information, and they come back 3 days later, they haven't made a purchase that day because they actually want to ponder and think and all that? Or do you find that the questions are in such a way they're like, okay, I actually feel confident now that I even just through a half hour, maybe 45-minute conversation, I mean, I know you, Dave. I've engaged with you at the gun shop, so I know how involved and invested you are in getting people to understand what they're trying to do and what they're trying to purchase. So, I mean, maybe after they have that initial conversation with you, do you feel that they are willing to, make that purchase that day? Or do you feel like maybe it's a breakdown of, maybe some that day, some come back in a few days after a little bit more thinking?
It's definitely very dependent on the person. I'd say probably 50-50. And in having those conversations, you can also stress the importance of proper training. So I've definitely had some interactions where I've said I will sell you a gun today, but I would highly suggest trying before you buy if you can. I'd always say that that's the best approach. But you do get the people that know in their head that they're going to be walking out with a firearm that day. And so in those cases, you just want to try to get them into something that you both feel is going to be the best fit.
Yeah, and that's an important piece. You mentioned training, and obviously with training, I know that you're also indicating safety as well. So I'm sure you review like all the safety procedures and stuff. And for those who may not have listened to episode 1, we talk about training possibilities, training options, and we also really stress the safety rules as well. So for those who might, like I said, may not have listened to the first episode, would encourage you to, go back and listen to, what we talk about with the safety rules as well.
And so, Dave, you were talking a bit about, people coming in and buying for home defense, general self-defense, and getting them into something that works for them. I guess I just want to dig into a bit about what the responses you've normally gotten for home defense, and then what platform you've steered them towards, or what scenarios come up most often in those conversations that you've had, and what are those platforms that you've ended up saying, hey, I think this works best for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of like we guys touched on in the first episode, it's a very personal preference. Everyone is going to have something that works better for them. Just I know Jim carries something different than I do, and it works for both of us. Basically, breaking down how they envision that firearm being used. If it is something to potentially be carried in the future, that's definitely going to have an impact. I wouldn't steer someone towards a rifle if it's something that they're looking to carry. So breaking that down is one of the first questions that I ask. Most people coming in are inclined to go the handgun route. If it's going to be strictly for home defense, I do generally make the point that most people are naturally going to be a better rifle shooter than the handgun shooter, just basic body mechanics.
Yeah, and I was hoping that you would mention that. Could you go into a little bit more detail? Because this is very interesting, because when people that I've taken to the range, they have this view of, I'm going to learn on a pistol. Sometimes I might actually introduce a rifle first, and they get nervous. They think, oh my gosh, I'm learning on a rifle. This is not what I was anticipating. And then I try to explain to them, but I would love to hear, what you, your perspective, your opinion on, why rifle versus pistol in that specific scenario.
Exactly. It comes down to basic body mechanics and the points of contact you have with that firearm. Rifle gives you your two hands as well as your shoulder. It's just going to be a more steady platform for everyone, assuming that rifle fits that person's stature. Whereas pistol, it's just your hands, arms, muscles. So I think for a lot of people, handgun is visually less intimidating. And I think that's where a lot of first-time shooters will naturally steer themselves towards.
Mm.
Well, I think there's also a big piece of culture and what we're seeing in media and movies and TV in terms of what people see, and so you don't see a ton of rifles in media, or when you're hearing about it on the news, you hear about handguns. And to your point, I think, Dave, you're talking about it being less intimidating. A smaller gun seems to be less intimidating than a bigger gun. A bigger gun, oh my gosh, it's going to have so much recoil and all of these things. And so, with that being said, what is the conversation you do have with somebody when you do steer them toward a rifle or maybe a shotgun, and their concerns are, hey, oh my gosh, this thing is going to like blow me out of my shoes, or like I'm going to fall backwards, or whatever the case might be?
It can be tough to overcome that initial stigma, I guess. In terms of the rifle, explaining kind of the mechanics of it, oftentimes I'll pull just a box of ammo and show them the round. Realistically, these days, one of the most common rounds in the U.S. is 5.56 or 223. And explaining that it's really just a spicy 22. So that generally gets a laugh out of some people. Shotgun is an interesting one. It's definitely one that's going to take more training compared to generally a rifle. Just because they do have a lot more recoil. You're dealing with generally less rounds. So getting those manipulations down to a point where they're second nature is a lot tougher. And there's not as much standardization across platforms as opposed to one of the more common rifles in the United States, if not the most common, the AR platform.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I agree. Going from one AR to the next AR, all of the safeties, operations, charging handles, it's all in the same place, right? And so you don't have to really worry too much about going from one to the other. And so I wanted to shift now, because you had said that there are a number of people who come to you and have conversation, and self-defense and concealed carry is something that a lot of people come in and buy for. And so could you tell us a little bit more about some of the reasoning that people have for going that route as opposed to the home defense route?
Yeah, absolutely. We get people who generally just want to have a tool with them that evens the playing field. We were talking about a lady that walked into a gun shop and just wanted something that was going to even the playing field because she didn't feel comfortable in a physical altercation. And I think that's the case for a lot of people. For others, they may live in a bad area and just want something that's going to always be with them.
And so that's an interesting thing, is talking about people who live in bad areas, because you hear a lot of times that hey, this is it helps, it contributes to or exacerbates an issue in those areas if there are lawful gun owners. Have you noted that mentality or that line of thinking is something that people who do live in a bad area are considering, or is that something, hey, it's just protection for myself, right? It's not the statistics or the news articles or whatever the case aren't mattering that much to them?
I think from the media standpoint, highlighting that there are areas that are worse than others, and it gets people thinking that I'm buying this for personal protection, not necessarily to go out and cause problems. Mm-hmm. But just having something that if the worst were to happen, I stand a better chance of being able to defend myself.
Yeah, and that's something that we're trying to make sure that we communicate clearly, is that this is a tool, right? And like you said earlier in the podcast, it's like it's something in this specific example with the woman that was trying to, as she said, level the playing field. It's when you have people that are looking to attack you or looking to overtake you, it can be a very stressful, scary situation. And that's why we want to encourage as much training as you are financially able to with your time. And that's why we just want you to dedicate dedicate the resources that you have. All of the audience members that are listening, dedicate the time and the money, the effort that you are willing to spend to have a good solid foundation of what it means to, if you do choose to carry for personal protection, outside of your home. It's a very important responsibility that one needs to realize, but at the same time, it could be a matter of protecting your life. And as grim as that sounds, it happens every day, unfortunately. So it's something that we want to just stress is that, if and when you decide to, make that decision, it's definitely something that we encourage even more with training.
Yeah, I also just want to stress that is a tool for an absolute last resort.
Exactly. Yes.
And definitely research the laws that apply to that, because it does change from state to state.
Mm-hmm. Even cities sometimes too. I mean, and not picking any particular city out for any particular reason, but Philadelphia or New York City or Chicago, right? Like they have local laws themselves, that may be differentiated between the state law or county law or federal law. So it's definitely something also, like David, that you said, we want to make sure the listener need to understand the differences and nuances of the laws that are in your particular city, state, area.
And I think that goes back to what you were talking about earlier, Jim, was the training aspect. So, Dave, as folks are coming in and talking to you about, hey, I want to buy something for concealed carry, I want to carry it on my person for personal defense outside of my home. What are some of the suggestions that you have for those customers around training and how would they go about that? Because again, we're talking about something that, hey, if I don't know much about buying a gun, going and getting training or seeking that out, or how to even begin, that's even further out of reach. So I guess what are some of the most common suggestions that you have for your customers?
So I'm very fortunate to work at a shop that also has a range that offers training. So that's usually part of the conversation in terms of a first-time buyer, is at the very least take a basic pistol course. Highlights of that, it's very safety, very much a safety focus. Past that, especially if people wanted to try before they buy, there are plenty of places that offer private instruction. I will say definitely research the instructor, because not everyone comes from the same place and is necessarily at the same level.
One thing that jumps to mind for me, in addition, as we're talking about safety and just the basics, outside of just handling the firearm, are hunter safety courses. Every state probably has some sort of hunter safety course that folks can enroll in, either almost free or incredibly low cost. And a lot of that has some sort of class portion or online literature or a booklet that you can download. And, reviewing that material and passing a hunter safety course in your local state, I think would be a fantastic way. If, again, we're talking about people of all different budgets. If you are budget constrained, it would be a great way to get some of that. What do you guys think about state level or state-sponsored hunter safety courses as an intro for a new or prospective gun owner?
I definitely think it's a good idea. I hadn't even thought of that, but now that you bring it up, that's a fantastic option. I know at least here in New Hampshire, those do fill up very quickly. That was another, I guess, byproduct of the pandemic, is a lot more people started getting back into the outdoors, hunting, because that was one of the few things that was still available to them.
Mm. One thing that it kind of goes along with the hunter safety as well, because it's like a family, or it can be a family-oriented type of activity. But when I want to just take a quick relook at the self-defense concealed carry piece, do you have any customers that come in that might be a little bit more hesitant to make a purchase or a first purchase because of whether it be children or teens or anything like that? And how do you have that conversation with them when they're making that purchase? Like, they want to make a firearms purchase. They want to have that last resort if needed. They want to have the ability to protect themselves, their family. But how do you have that conversation with somebody who might have a family already and teens, children, anything like that?
Yeah, it's definitely a very valid concern, and it's not something to be taken lightly. But educating them on different ways to store that firearm when it may be out of their sight, or left at home, with children around, just making sure that that firearm is not accessible. So on the very basic level, either cabinet or a safe, or some. It's not my personal recommendation, but keeping ammunition separate from that firearm. Well, I know some people that when they leave on trips, they'll pull the firing pin, and just store that separately.
I actually never thought of that before. That's very interesting. That's a very interesting piece. Now, that also is assuming that the person that is possessing that firearm knows how to do that disassembly and can also reassemble it very safely.
That is correct.
So that might not be a recommendation for the beginner.
Correct, and not a general recommendation by any means. But if it's something that you feel comfortable with and have the knowledge to do, it's an option.
Sure.
So you you just touched on safes, and I just wanted to kind of pick your brain a bit about safes and recommendations from people who are buying a long arm versus a handgun. I guess what for the folks who are listening, what are some of the more common types of safes that they might encounter either in your store or online, and then really high level, maybe some features and then price points.
Kind of on the basic level would be something like a simple lockbox. Keeps prying eyes and hands off, while still being relatively affordable and portable. Moving up from there would be something like a cabinet, not the stereotypical glass front and wood, very aesthetically pleasing, but not all that secure at all. More so like a usually sheet metal safe, with either a combination lock or just a key lock. That for a lot of people is going to be a little bit more approachable than one of the high-end safes where you're talking a lot of weight. Sometimes, especially if you live on the second floor, you have to make sure that floor is going to take that weight. And it is they are movable, but it is a more permanent option. So for myself, I live in an apartment on the second floor. I did opt for the cabinet route. With that said, that setup was not inexpensive. Just it's based on some of the features it has, but it's definitely a worthwhile investment. Lockboxes you can find generally probably as low as $20 or so. Some of those high-end safes, you're looking $10,000-$15,000 on the high end, and
Ooh.
You see some of the pictures online of people who have made gun vaults, and it is part of their home. So that's the far extreme.
That's the dream, though, right?
Oh, always.
So you're talking about lockboxes and them being inexpensive. One of the ones that I've seen pretty often on the internet is the stop box. Have you any experience with stop boxes?
Not personally, no.
Okay.
I've had a little bit with the Voltex. Manufacturer I work with ships some models with those, so I've played it a little bit.
Gotcha. I have a few Voltex myself. I think they're a fantastic product, but again, this is for folks who have not purchased a firearm previously or looking to really get into their first one right now. And so I just want to make sure that we're talking about all of the more economical options, especially if it's not something that they're looking to get into. Where, hey, I got 5 rifles, 7 rifles, and like 3 or 4 handguns or whatever the case is. It's, hey, I have maybe 1 handgun, maybe 1 rifle, and what can I get for a system that will keep people who aren't supposed to, have access out, and then but at the same time allow me to have access when I need to get to it quickly.
Exactly. Not to necessarily name drop, but the company that makes the cabinets I own also does kind of 1 and 2 long gun boxes that will fit under a bed. Keypad lock. So it's still quick to get to if you needed to access it in an emergency, but it will still keep hands off that don't need to be there.
Well, let's name drop so that we can give the folks listening in at least some good places. Is it a Hornady product?
No, actually, Secure It.
Secure It. Okay, yeah, I've seen a lot of reviews and a lot of positive interactions that folks have had on the internet with Secure It. So, what is the, I guess from the most economical standpoint, like lowest cost? What are we looking at with a Secure It cabinet or box?
I can't for the life of me remember off the top of my head. It's been a couple of years since I was looking, but if I had to reason to guess on those ones, probably $100 to $200.
Okay.
And you can definitely find other products similar to them in that range.
Okay, and that's not outrageous. So I guess let's since we're talking about price, right? We really haven't touched on price in terms of firearms, whether it's for pistol or rifle or shotgun. So, what price points can people be reasonably expecting when walking into a gun store and saying, "Hey, I'm going to buy my first pistol. I'm going to buy my first rifle," and then obviously a cost of ammo or whatever the case is. We can talk about that in a bit as well. But are they looking at $200, $300, $400, $700? What is I guess a reasonable cost that somebody can have in their head for what they might pay for a quality firearm?
It is definitely going to depend on the platform. And again, Jim was just making a face at me that it can be as much as you want it to be.
Yeah.
But I'd say for a quality new handgun, you're probably looking ballpark 4 to 6, kind of on the lower end. That brings up an interesting point, though, of also exploring used options, because oftentimes, just like cars, those take a depreciation hit as soon as they leave the shop. So another option to look at would be like police trade-ins. A lot of departments, when they upgrade to a newer model, they'll often sell those older firearms back to a dealer, and you can oftentimes find some great deals there.
That actually opens up a really good question is, like, how do you, as a customer walking into a gun shop and you have these conversations about prices, let's just, for example, let's just talk handguns for a second. So if somebody wants to buy a pistol, you speak with them for 15, 20 minutes, and you kind of get the sense of, yeah, they kind of are in the pistol realm kind of discussion. How do you help them understand like what may be a good deal versus a bad deal, and how do you kind of steer them not towards something that you're not telling them what to buy, of course. You're trying to help them understand what the best thing might be for them, right? So how do you help them understand like what might be that purchase?
Yeah, everyone who works the counter has a different approach to it. What I'll generally do, I'll pull three or four maybe out of the case. Have them side by side. Have the customer pick them up, hold them, walk them through some of the feature sets that some may have versus not. Handguns, especially in this day and age, optics ready versus non-optics ready. Manual safety versus no manual safety, because that's also a very personal preference. Some people feel strongly either way. But it's definitely something to consider and walk through both the pros and cons of both.
Now, just for our listeners' sake, so optics ready does not mean that it comes with an optic, correct? That means something a little bit different, right?
Correct. So optics ready is generally, the slide has been cut to accept a red dot from many different companies, just based on the optics mounting footprint, how those screws are lined up. Some handguns these days are coming with factory installed optics, which opens up a whole nother rabbit hole of, is that the right optic for you? But I don't know if we want to dive down that hole right now.
Nah, that'll be for the accessories discussion. Yeah, we're just
That's
trying
a
to
deep rabbit hole.
break the seal a little bit. Yeah.
So I guess high level again. Let's touch back on why an optic versus no optic for somebody who might be buying their first gun. What are the benefits? What are the drawbacks? What really is an optic, right? You're talking about red dots, but I've spoken with folks who think that a red dot is a visual laser, right? They're like, hey, you mean a laser? No. So, Dave, would you mind just walking us through what an optic is, some of the pros and cons to having one and not having one?
Yeah, I guess one of the pros of not having one is that it is a little bit lower profile. Generally speaking, less to go wrong. That's not to say iron sights can't fail, because they can. But it's removing some stuff from the equation there. Benefits to an optic are you can have a target focus, just talking in terms of your eyesight. Our eyes can only focus on one thing at a time. And so learning to shoot with a red dot, for a lot of people, is much easier than learning iron sights and then transitioning to an optic. Not to say you can't start on irons and go to an optic. I'm in the middle of that right now.
Yeah, I can tell you that for probably the first 7 or 8 years, I shot iron sights. And when I made the jump to go into my first red dot, it was, I had shot red dots on other people's guns, but when I had started to train with red dots on my guns, I fell into the horrible, like the bad habit of, closing my non-dominant eye when I was, shooting irons, because, well, I can perfectly see, through, with the three dots of my irons lined up, this is perfect. And then you just don't need to close your second eye for the red dot, and then you shouldn't in both cases, honestly. But I just learned the really bad habit, and it took forever to get out of it. It took probably 3-4 years of just consistent training to not open my eye, to not close my eye and to shoot with both eyes open. When I would go back just for fun to shoot with iron sights again. So yeah, 100% agree. Like it's tricky when you're trying to make that jump from irons to red dots.
Yeah, I guess another pro of iron sights, it is going to be less expensive. On the flip side, the optic, as we touched on a bit before, it is going to be a simpler system to use. Just from a shooter's perspective.
So you talked about price a little bit. It's cheaper. What is the cost of a general red dot that somebody might purchase?
For a pistol red dot, kind of on the low end of what would be considered a quality dot, you'd be looking probably mid 200s, all the way up to, you can be looking at 7-8 for some of them. But generally it's going to fall kind of in that $3,000 to 5 or 6 range, just depending on manufacturer.
So as we're having this conversation, I'm just doing the tally in my head, right? It can start to get expensive pretty quickly, right? If we're talking about $400 for a pistol, and then $250 to $300 for a red dot, if that is what somebody wants. So we're already talking about, at least on the low end, we're talking anywhere between $650 and $700, and we haven't even bought ammo yet. So what can people expect if they're saying, hey, I'm not going to get a brand new gun out of the box, a used gun? Is that something that is worthwhile for a new shooter to consider? And how much less can they expect to pay for, say, a used pistol versus a brand new one?
Yeah, it can definitely be a big financial investment all up front when you're starting from scratch. On the used side of things, it's going to depend on the feature set and manufacturer. But generally, you're looking safely kind of 100 to 200 less, and that's going to vary a lot just depending on what it is. One of the other upsides to looking into the used side of things is some people trade in firearms that may have a holster with it, may have extra magazines. So while that price point may be pretty close to a new model of the same firearm, you're getting a full package with it without spending a lot more.
Got it. And one of the things that I had heard visiting one of the local gun stores around me is consignment. So that might be something that people hear about guns when they're going to a gun store. So can you talk a bit about what a consignment gun might be?
Yeah, absolutely. The shop that I work at doesn't offer consignment as an option, but it is actually something that I've used in the past. Essentially, customer looking to sell a firearm walks into a store that offers consignment as an option. They list basically what price they would like to sell it for. The shop will either come back with something that may be a bit more realistic, or agree to put that firearm out for sale on their sales floor. And when that firearm sells, they take a percentage of the money for that and cut you a check for the rest.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Like I said, it's something that somebody may hear, or they might see a sign, right? It says, hey, I've seen signs in gun shops where they say, hey, these are consignment, and they may be wondering what that means specifically. Anything else, Jim, that you can think of? The rest of what I would be curious about would just be pro tips and general things to do and not to do when going into a gun store. But I wanted to make sure that we were covering all of the most relevant topics for people who are listening.
Yeah, one of the things that I was kind of hoping to get a little bit of insight to is, so Dave, as you're talking to a new customer or somebody that maybe you started to get to know a little bit, but they haven't made that purchase yet, so you're still kind of educating. You're in that education process. So what do you think are some things that people maybe don't ask a sales rep or a salesperson, a retail person at that shop that aren't obvious? Like, what do you like specifically, what do you think are some questions that maybe people should ask you as a retail person?
Especially on the handgun side of things, looking at the support that is out there for whatever model, from a holster compatibility, potentially, we kind of touched on it before, but some of the different feature sets that particular models may have versus not others. But a big thing is that, I don't want to say aftermarket, but kind of that support structure that is around that particular model or brand, because that can have a big impact, especially if it is something you're looking to get into carrying, because it doesn't do you any good to have a firearm if you don't have a quality holster for it.
So it sounds like a big thing is aftermarket support, maybe, or after purchase support.
Supporting system.
There you go. Okay. All right. Yeah, cool. That definitely seems like a big one.
Ammo availability is also a big one there, as well as cost. Just factoring in that into, because that is consumable. So if you go with some obscure cartridge that two manufacturers load for, you're going to have far fewer options, and it's likely going to be more expensive to support that system.
One thing that you just mentioned ammo, and it made me think of something that we were talking about earlier when it came to storage. So when it comes to ammo storage, do you ever talk with the customers about the proper way? And I use that in terms of like quotes, right? Because there might be, some differentiating opinions, but just curious of like, when you come to like ammo storage, obviously there's an environmental aspect to it in your home, and whether or not you have ammo cans or something like that. But what are obviously I just gave away a little bit of a sneak peek, but kind of in your mind, what are some proper ways that somebody, say they buy they buy their first pistol, they buy their first rifle, well, they need maybe 100 rounds, 200 rounds, something like that, just to get them going to the range for the first maybe 3-4 times. So how do you tell them, okay, here's a good way to store the ammo, in between those range sessions?
Yeah, definitely the environmentals come into play there. That goes for not just the ammo, but the firearm in general. Just humidity is the biggest killer of both. So just like potatoes, cool, dry place. Ammo cans are an awesome approach. May not be the most practical if you only have 100 rounds or so, but it's definitely convenient to have just a dedicated, some sort of dedicated container to keep those in, that may or may not be the factory box. But yeah, humidity is the big one there. So I like to use the kind of the damp rid little containers, and just change those out periodically. I found that works well for me, but there are definitely other options out there.
There is one more generic topic that I want to get to just at the very end, but that'll be just for part of closing remarks. But yeah, Marvin, what do you got?
So I wanted to start with, something that people see on the internet a lot on YouTube videos, right? So if your gun store does these 5 things, run, right? So Dave, could you tell us what I guess the top 5 or however many list of things you would say, if somebody walks into a gun store and their salesperson or any employee from the gun store does these things, then they should consider taking their business elsewhere?
One big one that I would say would be if anyone is pushing you towards a specific brand. Because what a lot of people don't know is that manufacturers will oftentimes offer spiffs to sell their particular product. So going back to kind of my approach, that's why I want to get not as many, but give the customer an option to see what works best for them. Because I've definitely worked with folks in the past, not necessarily in the firearms industry, but general retail, where it almost seemed like they'd pick one particular product to sell that day, and that was all they were going to sell.
Okay. What else? What else is a sign of a bad gun store, or that somebody can expect a bad experience at a gun store?
It's going to sound bad, but upselling when it's not necessary to the customer's needs. That's why I always lead with what's the overall budget we're trying to stay within, because it's not my place to spend your money for you. It's fun to do so with your friends, but I'm in a position to help you get the most out of your money, as opposed to sell you something that you may not need at this stage, or just let you know that it's a option down the line.
Gotcha. And I guess that does lead me back into the money piece of it again. Is what is how does somebody have that conversation? Would it just be better that a customer comes in and says, "Hey, look, I've got $450 that I can spend on a firearm. What can I get?" Or is there another approach that you would recommend for somebody who's never bought a gun before and may be on a much more restricted budget than one of the three of us when we're walking into a gun store?
I'd say it's definitely a good starting point for someone walking in. Any good counter employee is going to ask what the budget is somewhere in their line. It helps both the customer as well as the employee, just giving a rough basis as to where they want to be. That way, again, going to sound bad, but time isn't wasted. If I'm showing Jim a $15,000 rifle and he came in for $500 handgun, that doesn't do us any good. Either party.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. So anything else? I've seen some things out there where it's like, hey, ammo sale or whatever the case is. Anything else that might be an indication, whether it's like signage or whether approached by employees?
I'd say definitely, especially in shops that also have ranges, just the overall attention to safety from both employees and customers. I've walked into some gun stores where it's less of a safe environment than I would typically want to be in, just in terms of overall firearms handling and such. That's definitely a big one. In terms of the sales, you don't see it as much these days, especially post-pandemic, but that is something to look out for. I'd say do your research. If we all have cell phones, if you see something that looks too good to be true, it may be. And also on the flip side, that sale price may be another shop's retail price.
That's a good point, and I won't name drop just because I know that you didn't name drop at the beginning, but the shop that you're at, Dave, it really... I've actually been really impressed with the use case there, and I've made a few purchases from that use case, and I know for a fact that the people at that shop that are reviewing the guns that are sold as used, you do a really good job of ensuring that the functionality is good, that they are in good working order, and honestly, like I haven't ever had an issue with those used guns, knock on wood, right? So so it's just, I've been very impressed with how your shop specifically does that, and I never, like I said, I never felt like I ever got a bad deal or anything like that. So when you find a good shop, it's and I'm speaking as a customer now, as I have made those purchases from that used gun case. You kind of get to know the people there, and it's never bad to and Dave's probably going to laugh. It's never bad to just go in and talk with the people. I basically live there, right? But just getting to know them and on a personal level, and that just makes those interactions a whole lot easier and more comfortable. And hopefully, to our listeners, if you're able to have conversations with the people at your local gun shop too, it's just it just makes it a lot more friendlier, and you can have those deeper, honest conversations as you make more purchases in the future, hopefully.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that, because there are definitely quite a few customers who came in as first-time buyers that have we've had the pleasure of see kind of progress through their growth as a firearm owner. It's awesome making those personal connections. I do think Jerry has a beat, but
yep.
but.
Yeah, and like honestly, if I didn't have the spend the time there, you wouldn't be here on this podcast probably, because so here we are. But yeah, I don't know if I can beat Jerry though. Yeah, Jerry, he's
retired though.
He needs a bed there. Pretty much has one.
He's got that table over.
So to touch real quick, Dave, on on used firearms, because we talked about it being a good deal, and you and Jim just talked about how well the store that you work at manages that inventory. What is something that a new or prospective gun owner who might be, hey, you know what, new is too expensive, I'm gonna get used. What are some of the things that they should be asking the counter employee, and things that they should be looking out for when purchasing a used firearm?
Two big ones right off the bat. Has the firearm been test fired? Some shops aren't fortunate enough to have a range, so it can be tough in those instances. Again, we're fortunate that everything that comes through our shop is test fired. Another question to ask would be, does the shop offer any sort of warranty? If something is wrong, broken, parts missing, is the shop going to do right by you and either replace that part, send it off to have warranty work done, or are you up a creek?
Gotcha. And even with like shops that may test fire, is there anything else aside from the test firing and the warranty that somebody should be aware of? Sometimes guns look more worn. Are there things that, hey, you should check, firing pin, or check, extractor? I mean, again, expensive thing for a lot of people to buy. Some people may not have the ability to say, hey, this is broken, and I got to send it to a gunsmith now.
Yeah, I'd say on a semi-automatic handgun, good places to check would be the barrel, both the hood and towards the muzzle end. That's where that's going to have contact with the slide. So they're natural wear points. We've had some used stuff come through with no wear at all, used in name only. We've had other stuff come through that has definitely been well loved. Touching, kind of going back to the police trade-ins, those can often be a great deal because those are carried a lot but not shopped often. As a general rule, some departments definitely put them through the ringer. But on those, you may see a lot of holster wear on the slide and frame, but not necessarily on the internals. And again, from a first-time buyer, those may be a little bit more difficult to check, but the kind of knowing a couple of those crucial wear points can help you out.
Is that something that would be appropriate to ask a local gun store employee? Is, hey, I don't know how to break this down. Could you break this down and show me all of the parts of this used pistol, and hey, can I see it? Can you explain to me? Is that something that I guess a prospective gun buyer can or should do, or is that something that's kind of, hey, that's asking a bit much?
No, I don't think it's asking too much at all. We definitely prefer you to ask us to do it, as opposed to just taking a gun down without checking first. But it's definitely, and that goes back to kind of that education piece of, you should be able to at least field strip, so that you can clean and lubricate that firearm. So that is actually something that not too many people ask, but I would recommend that just being a question both on the new and used side, if it's not something that you're comfortable doing. If it's just that knowledge in general, a little bit less so nowadays, just because some of the restrictions, but YouTube is a valuable resource for that as well.
You mentioned cleaning and lubricating, so I always think of somebody I know. He's an instructor, and he has, on numerous occasions when I've taken classes with him, he has said, yeah, I haven't cleaned my gun, cleaned it in about 10,000 rounds. I just put the lubrication on, the specific contact points, and I'm good to go. So obviously that's one extreme, right? And I'm not, by no means am I advocating for that. Hey, it works for him. It works for him. He's an instructor at a very well-respected academy.
I think I know the instructor you're talking about, and he is notorious, but he's also said it's for the R&D team.
Oh, okay.
So he is notorious for running his work guns, his personal firearms. He does actually take care of.
Okay. Yep.
But no, his work guns he runs until he has a major parts breakage.
Okay, that makes sense then. And he's doing that for a particular research purpose.
Yes.
Okay, that's
it makes for a nice anecdote, but
yeah, right. So yes, so of course that's one extreme. That's as David just said, yeah, it's for a particular reason. But is there for the listeners, is there a general sense of how many rounds should I before I clean my gun, or how many rounds until I strip the gun, or how many rounds until I need to relubricate? Obviously, it goes a little bit to the environmental piece as well. So there's a lot of nuance, and there's a lot of, well, it depends, right? So, but just curious what your thoughts.
Yeah, it really does depend. As awful as an answer that is, but again, you get the people who break their stuff completely down and clean it after every range trip. For most people, that's not going to be necessary. If it is something that you are carrying or have in the home for protection, I would definitely, at the very least, make sure it's lubricated. Every manufacturer is going to have their own recommendation.
Sure.
And depending on the platform, it may need more upkeep than others. Like a 1911 or 2011 is going to be a little bit more finicky than a modern striker fired gun, just by nature of design.
So that kind of leads me to the next question that I have for you is, what's a good price for ammo? We talked about the price of cabinets. We've talked about the price of red dots. We talked about the price of new and used guns. What's a decent price that folks out there can expect for say a box of 50 rounds of 9mm?
Yeah. So a box of 50, just basic range ammo, and 9mm. You're going to find these days in store probably on the low end $15. I mean, going on up, and it's going to depend on the shop, kind of what their margins are too. Smaller shops are obviously going to have a little bit harder time pricing competitively with someone that buys in massive quantities. But I'd say about $15-$16 on the low end right now is pretty common. In 223 or 556 box of 20, you're looking right around $10 on the low end. That offer also brings into the question online ammo sales. With that, I just say watch what you're paying for shipping, because that offsets that price by quite a bit, just depending on what you're paying for shipping versus the boxes.
Yeah, there's plenty of email deals that you get. It's like, oh, get a case of 1,000 rounds of 223 for I'm making a number up, $430, and you're like, oh, that's a great deal. And then it's $60 for shipping, right? So
I'd say a good resource for a lot of people is the website AmmoSeek. You can get a general sense of kind of what stuff is going for. Obviously, those are online prices, but it's basically just a search engine that you can punch in whatever you're looking for and just kind of compare.
All right, and what about say somebody wants to get a shotgun? What's a box of say buckshot going out the door for these days?
Box of 5. The shotgun is a funny one because it really depends a lot on the manufacturer and the load. Anywhere from $5 to $10 for a box of 5 rounds of double or triple aught buckshot. Birdshot you can get for a lot less. I wouldn't recommend it for defensive purposes, but if you're just at an outside range shooting trash, then it can be a pretty inexpensive way to have some fun.
So for some sort of level of defense ammo, it sounds like between $1 to $2 per shot.
Correct.
Okay.
They're definitely some deals out there. I know one particular brand that we have, their low recoil slugs is actually quite cheap. So a lot of us have scooped some of those up.
I know exactly the box you're talking about.
That's and I think that's something that a lot of people are also not necessarily considering is the cost of range ammo versus defensive ammo. And so, can you talk a little bit about the differences between range ammo and defensive ammo?
On the pistol side of things, most of your range ammo is going to be full metal jacket or frangible. Frangible is a lot less common, but on some places where you're shooting steel up close, it is necessary. Defensive ammo is often sold in either boxes of 20 or 25. You can find 50 round boxes, a little bit less common. But for that, you're looking at roughly probably $20 to $25 a box for a box of 20 to 25. So it's still right around $1 a round. And those you're looking at, generally speaking, a jacketed hollow point, something that is going to expand when it impacts.
And
just real quick, just want to jump in. So, very brief, 2 to 3 sentence definition difference between your full metal jacket versus your jacketed hollow point, just for listeners' sake.
Yeah. So full metal jacket is exactly what it sounds like. If you pull the round out of the box, it's gonna be basically smooth, and coming up to not a point, but a kind of rounded nose. Whereas you pull out a hollow point, and again, it's exactly what it sounds. The middle is going to have a cavity, and a lot of times you can see what will eventually be expanding out into almost petals, like on a flower, when that round does expand and impact.
And the reason is because
limits over penetration, and also a kind of a byproduct of that is increased lethality.
Thanks for the clarification.
Absolutely.
And so that leads me to my next question is your recommendation for your customers in terms of purchasing ammo. So, how much if they're just starting out, how much range ammo versus how much defensive ammo, and do I buy a box of each, or do I buy 2 boxes of range and 1 box of of defensive? What are your recommendations?
It's definitely going to come down to the situation, and kind of what the person is going back to budget again, what we're looking at. I'd recommend buying at least enough defensive ammo to load the magazines that the firearm comes with. Range ammo really depends on the person, how much they're looking to train. Because what you, myself, Jim go through at a typical range day may be vastly different than someone else.
All right. Do you have a general recommendation when they are a brand new gun owner?
Typically, it'd be a box or 2 of defensive ammo, just depending on the magazine capacity, and generally a box or 2 of range ammo. So call it ballpark 150, 200 rounds.
All right. And that sounds pretty reasonable, but again, it all gets a bit pricey. So I think that is something that I do when I have conversations with people who are looking to buy for the first time. Hey, this is not going to be a cheap endeavor. It is going to be something that is that's going to be an investment. It's an investment in your own safety. It's an investment in your ability to defend yourself or your home. And so it's not something to be taken lightly, and that there can't necessarily be an expectation that it's going to be, hey, you're going to get out of there for say $200 or $300 and expect to have a quality tool firearm, and then 2 to have what you necessarily need to keep yourself safe, but also to make sure that you are being responsible and storing it and keeping it out of the hands of folks who shouldn't have it. So I guess when folks are walking out of the gun store, what can you tell us? what folks generally walk out with if they're first time versus what they really should walk out with first time?
Not really sure. We try to do a good job of kind of fitting people to what's going to work out well for them. With that said, all of us have made purchases that we didn't end up liking for whatever reason. So from a first time buyer, a lot of times that initial investment is going to be higher than like a returning customer who might be stopping back in just pick up a couple boxes of ammo. So it's stressing that it is it's not just the firearm. It is a whole system that you're looking at kind of for that first time.
Okay. And is the expectation like buy a holster, buy a lockbox, buy ammo, buy gun, or hey, just make sure you have the gun, you have got the cable lock, we're good there, and then some ammo. I guess just kind of the expectation again. All of this going back to cost and just making sure that folks have an idea of like, hey, I'm going to go in and I'm going to buy an extra $300 in red dot, $200 lockbox, and $150 in ammo, whatever the case might be.
I think it's definitely from a employee's perspective, we like to see the customer walking out with that whole system, kind of everything they need. With that said, it's going to depend on the customer whether or not they feel comfortable just walking out with the firearm holster down the line. Touching on that for a second, holsters are one of the hardest accessories to kind of keep around just because there's so much variation, so many different companies, different models, different setups. So that's a lot of times is one that they may not walk out with a holster, but with some information and steer them towards some reputable holster manufacturers that may work out better than one of my most hated products, just the generic holsters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm looking forward to in the future, Marvin. Hopefully, we can have a really good representative from a holster company on, and that'll be, of course, in the works. As time goes on. So we'll for sure get deeper into that topic, and I bet it's going to be a lot of nuances and a lot of it depends, just like everything else, right?
Everyone has a box of holsters that didn't work for them.
I was that person. I thought, I'm never going to be that person that has a box of holsters. Literally an entire box of holsters. It started as my bedside drawer, and then that graduated into a big cardboard box that I can't get rid of it, so. But so just wrapping us up here, I have one final topic, and that's that August is National Shooting Sports Month. So this would be a perfect opportunity for you to go down to your local gun shop, and you can check things out. Tell them that you got a lot of questions and that you're interested in learning a little bit more about what they have in stock. See what they say, see what they can help you with, and they might be running a deal considering the month, and you might be able to get a free box of ammo or a class half off or something like that. But who knows? You might get lucky. But just wanted to say thanks to Dave and for your time. And Marvin, anything else before we close?
No, I really just echoing what Jim said. Thank you so much, Dave. Really appreciated you coming on and having this great conversation with us, and hopefully our listeners will find this information useful and help them as they walk into a gun store and ease some of their anxiety and have those conversations on their own.
Absolutely. Appreciate you having me on, guys.
Absolutely. Any final comments, Dave?
No, just get out there, learn, and start shooting.
Awesome.
It's a fun time.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Alrighty.
All right.
Take care.
Bye.